Richard Petty's astonishing career behind the wheel has come to an end. But the legacy of the King and his influence on the fans in the sport of stock car racing will endure forever. His 9 most popular driver awards are testimony to the fans' reciprocating love. The 200 career victories and 7 Winston Cup championships confirm what is already common knowledge. Richard Petty will always be the king of stock car racing. Welcome to the Richard Petty Museum in Level Cross, North Carolina. This shrine to stock car racing stands as a modest reminder of the remarkable accomplishments of the King. Hello everyone, I'm John Kernan. In the next half hour, we're going to take a walk down memory lane, reliving some of the magical moments from the King's 35-year driving career. Most people think kings are born in England or other foreign countries, but not the king of stock cars. Richard Petty was born in 1937 in Level Cross, North Carolina. He had a normal upbringing, with the exception that his father was Lee Petty, a stock car great. By the age of 14, Richard could be found under the hood of one of his father's race cars. But he did not sit in the driver's seat until he was 21. That's when his father gave him a 57 Plymouth to race down in Columbia, South Carolina. And Richard finished 6th in his driving debut, making quite an impression on those who witnessed the event. Well, during the next couple of years, Richard continued to work for his daddy. He also began improving his own driving skills, running in 8 races in 1958 and 33 races in 1959. But it wasn't until 1960 that Richard felt he had what it took to actually make a career out of racing. In the following decade, Richard began to make his mark in racing, and on August 22nd, 1969, the King recorded his 100th win, the first NASCAR driver ever to surpass that mark. The next 15 years saw many changes for Richard, including various car manufacturers, from Plymouth to Dodge to Ford and finally to Pontiac. During this time, Richard won another 100 races and surpassed all other drivers in the world with a career high of 200 wins. Throughout all the wins and hoopla, the King has retained his homespun philosophy and respect for people of all kinds. And that's one of the reasons why Richard Petty is known as a legend in stock car racing. Hey, Rich, I guess first thing we want to talk about the early years. When you were a child, I believe I read you were like 6 years old when you saw your first race at a dirt track not too far from here. What kind of an influence did that have on you?
Well, I don't think the first race I ever saw was really a big influence. You know, my father was in the trucking business, and, you know, we weren't really in the racing business. I guess it was right after Second World War, somewhere in 47 or 48. My father and his brother got a modified race car, and we went to 2 or 3 races, so that kind of whetted your appetite to a certain extent. But then in 49 he started with the Grand Nationals at that time, and you know, it was just an automatic thing. I mean, you know, here we was getting to go all over the country just following the race car. So the race car was part of it, but the traveling was part of it too.
So it was the traveling that kind of piqued your interest? I mean, at what point in time did you say, wow, I want to be a race car driver? Well,
now it was way on down the road before I ever became, ever even thought about being a race car driver. I can remember in the early 50s and stuff, 50, 51, 52 and stuff, you would go up north and run a lot of races and stuff, and everybody asked me, you know, when you going to drive a car and all that, and I said, man, you know, I'm just going to work on them. I'm not interested in driving them. And at that time, I really wasn't interested in doing nothing except going with them and being around them. And I guess when I got out of school, I think I was 17, 18, and you know, then the interest really started developing then, and but father said, you know, you're not going to drive till you're 21, so don't worry about it. So I think I just really forgot it. I don't think I was really that hepped up on driving until it got close to being 21, and then it was not an overnight deal of saying that's what you wanted to do, and it wasn't a burning desire. It was just the idea that I knew one day I was going to try it, and I just waited for the time.
Petty gets rolling again, and Pearson is on his way to the final sprint for golden glory in the Daytona 500.
David was one that I had to wind up beating anywhere we went.
Richard Petty, a tribute to the King, is brought to you by First Brands Corporation, makers of STP gas treatment, and Chicagoland Processing Enviromint.
He's back. This time we get him. STP gas treatment cleans intake valves and fuel injectors to help engines run better. STP, the edge.
Attention racing fans. Richard Petty, who has made history for over 3 decades of professional racing, is now bidding all his fans farewell. To honor a lifetime of racing excellence, CPC Enviromint, the premier minters of sports and entertainment medallions, has been licensed to mint a limited edition of 15,000 pure silver commemorative medallions and 200 gold medallions. Each 1 troy ounce pure silver medallion is individually numbered and features Petty's likeness on the front, with the official 1992 Fan Appreciation Tour logo on the reverse. Each medallion comes in its own crushed suede display case, complete with historical booklet, and retails for $39.95. Enviromint is also offering a 2-piece silver and gold limited edition set. Only 200 will be minted. For more information on the sets or to order an individual medallion, call 1-800-765-0123. Visa and MasterCard accepted, 30-day money-back guarantee. 1-800-765-0123.
Now, throughout your career, you competed against some great drivers. Is there one that stands out in your mind that maybe is just a cut above the rest?
As far as I'm concerned, David Pearson was probably the best race car driver that I've ever driven against us. He was just a natural. He never had to strain to do anything. You watch him, you never thought that he was working that hard at it, but he was always one you had to wind up beating. And I guess I'll say David because I probably run more years with David. I ran, dirt tracks, run road courses, run little bitty tracks, great big tracks, run everything. But he was my toughest competitor for a long period of time.
Dramatic conclusion. A battle of giants, and the white flag flutters down on 2 great racing champions.
You're going to be side by side as they exit the bank and head for the finish line. Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Petty is sliding, slamming into the wall. He's coming down toward the finish line. Will he make it? He's still moving. The car stops 300, 400 feet shy of the finish line. Pearson is still running. Here's Petty trying to fire to come across the line. David Pearson moving down through as they come to the stripe. The winner is car number 21. It's going to be, I believe, Pearson's victory. We'll just have to wait and see. An amazing finish. Richard Petty's car demolished in the front end, as well as car number 21. An unbelievable finish. A terrible crash. Both cars in the wall. Both drivers kept on going. Richard Petty comes across the line. David Pearson has won the Daytona 500.
You mentioned how David was a natural. What about Richard Petty? Were you a natural, or did you have to work at it?
I don't know. I put it this way, I never worked too hard at anything I've ever done. So I don't think I worked that hard at driving. I just enjoyed driving, and when everything was right, then I always could get up for whatever the situation was. And I don't know that I really had to strain to do what I did. As I learned to do this stuff, it came a little at a time. It wasn't that I could just go out and do it. I had to learn it. And so from situation of me having to learn it, then I might not have been a natural.
In the early days of your career, did anybody come up to you and give you a piece of advice that helped you be successful?
Well, I guess the only advice I ever had was from my father. Don't tear the car up, you're going to have to work on it. One of those kind of deals. But as far as other drivers or sponsors or anybody, I've been real fortunate. I've sort of done my own thing. If it was a mistake, then nobody had to come and tell me. I knew it was a mistake, and I tried not to let it happen again. And then on the other side, if you've done something and it worked out pretty good, you say, okay, we'll do that again next time. And sort of just trial and error situation as much as anything else.
What would you say is the toughest part about being a race car driver and having the type of career that you had?
Well, I don't know. I'm the only one that went through what I went through. Mm-hmm. A lot of them went through a lot of other things that was tougher or easier or whatever. So I've got nothing to compare what I did with, because I never done anything else. I didn't have another profession or start into another profession or any of that stuff. Racing's all I've ever done. So, you know, to me, it really was not that hard. I mean, working on the car, driving the car, working on the pit crew. My father used to run, you know, driving the rigs back and forth to the racetracks and stuff. You know, you look back and everybody says, you know, good old days and all that stuff. Man, it was tough in the good old days. I know, I come through there. So, you know, all of us look back and pick out the good times, not the bad times, because the bad times overshadow the good times in the past. And, you know, right now we're just all so much better off than we were 10 or 15 or 20 or 40 years ago that sometimes we don't realize it.
The magic number is 200. It's just one more than 199, but it looks like a real, real big one.
Now, you can own the definitive documentary on the King, a production as hard driving as the man himself, Richard Petty, the legend. This limited edition 2-volume home video includes the official Petty collector's car. And if you order now, you'll receive this free commemorative poster. To order, call 1-800-547-4343 or send $38.95 plus $5 shipping and handling to Richard Petty, the legend, 805B Franklin Court, Marietta, Georgia, 30067.
NBA Inside Stuff's definitely not your normal TV show. Now, get ready for a new jam with a Not Your Normal magazine. NBA Inside Stuff magazine puts the NBA on the printed page and in your face. Read NBA Inside Stuff magazine. It's fun, it's exciting, and it's definitely not your normal magazine. Order all 4 issues of NBA Inside Stuff magazine for $13.99 and receive the NBA Inside Stuff hat brought to you exclusively by AJD. Call 1-800-NBA-DUNK.
You know, you've always handled the fans really well and the media too. And from all indications are, you started that out from almost day one. What made you realize that that was just going to be part of the job and the best way to handle it was to just handle it the way you have over the years? Well, I don't know that I looked at it from any kind of standpoint like that. You know, I went to Columbia, the first race I ever run, and somebody probably asked for an autograph. Man, it made my head feel bigger than the helmet. You know what I mean? It really made me feel good. So if somebody took time to look me up and get an autograph, man, I had time to sign it. And I always felt like that the next race, maybe there was 2 or 3 people. The next race, there was 8 or 10 or whatever. And it was just sort of a deal that I wasn't forced into it, but then people were forcing me into signing and taking pictures and stuff like that. I sort of went along with it, and it made me feel good that somebody wanted an autograph. And over the period of time, it got to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you realize that, hey, this is what it's all about. These are the people that's paying the bills and all this stuff. So, you know, once I got it started, then I just continued with it. In '79, the Daytona 500, a large live television audience, one of the wildest finishes ever. Do you think that really sparked a lot of fans' interest? Well, that's just one race. It was something for the people to talk about. If you remember, it was snowed that day all over the eastern seaboard, and nobody could do anything except watch the race. So that was a captive audience.
But it is win number 6 in '79 that ranks among his luckiest. He was a distant third. Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison were out front, battling for the lead.
Where will Cale make his move? He comes from the inside. Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. They hit again. They drive in the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. They slide down to the inside. Let's watch those third-place cars. They're out of it. Who is going to win it? Coming down. Third place. They're coming around for the finish. Coming down. Richard Petty is now pulling out in front. Darrell Waltrip is in second. A.J. Boyd is in third. Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front at the line. Waltrip is inside. Petty wins it. I know with all the races you've been in, it's kind of hard to pick one out, but I would think that the 200 at Daytona, the way that came down, the president was there, that you have to be able to recall the emotions that were running through you in those final laps and then afterwards. Well, you got to figure, we were still winning a few races from time to time then. Gentlemen, start your engine. From the start, the Firecracker 400 shaped up as a history maker, a confrontation of epic proportions. Richard Petty battled another old rival, Cale Yarborough. On his favorite racetrack, the king of stock car racing chased the biggest.
You know, we won the 200th race, and it was great. July the 4th, the last lap in front of the President of the United States, national TV, the whole deal. But it was just a 200th win. We didn't, you know, I never thought nothing about not winning 3 or 4 motor races that year.
At 200 miles per hour, a spectacular duel, banging fenders, and the winner is Richard Petty.
I don't think we got as emotionally involved in it as what if we knew it had been the last race. But we were pretty emotional because we'd run a lot of years for, you know, looking for the 200th. Well, we'd run probably the last couple of years looking for the 200th one anyway. And so in doing that, it was a crowning situation for us. I think that in the next couple of 3 years, you'll see him win a bunch of races, winning some championships, and carrying on with the Petty name.
To order your copy of Richard Petty, the legend, call 1-800-547-4343. Well, Richard, now that Kyle has really started to come into his own on the racetrack, a great year here in 1992, does that make you feel just a little bit better about leaving the family name on the racetrack to him?
Yes, from that standpoint. You know, Kyle's always been almost there. And finally, I think he's finally just turned around and said, okay, guys, you know, I'm 32 years old. If I'm ever going to do anything, I better do it now. And I think he's rededicated himself to driving the race car and being involved with the team and stuff like that. And I think it's really shown. And, you know, maybe it's one of those deals where the 2 Pettys in there, there was just so much luck, and neither one of us was getting enough of it from that standpoint. I was taking a little bit, and he was taking a little bit. Maybe when I stepped aside, then, you know, he'll go ahead and do what he's capable of doing. And he's shown it this year that he's very capable of doing whatever needs to be done. And I think that in the next couple of 3 years, you'll see him win a bunch of races, winning some championships, and carrying on with the Petty name.
You know, I have people come up to me every once in a while and they'll say, your son, when is he ever going to grow up? And I say, never. Because why should he? His father never grew up. I mean, they're like boys that have just been able to just enjoy playing, doing what they've done all these years. And they've been happy. Yeah, you be careful.
What type of advice have you given him? You spoke about the advice that your father gave you, don't tear the car up. What about Kyle?
Man, there went no way, you know, Kyle any advice. I guess the only advice I ever give Kyle was from the standpoint to be consistent. I said, look, if you go out there and you practice slow, I want you to make sure you run every lap slow. If you go out and run 1 or 2 laps fast, I want you to make sure you run every lap. So consistency is what, I guess, what I tried to build off of. It's what my father built off of. And whether you're good, bad, or indifferent, if you're consistent with it, eventually it'll come to you. So I guess that's about all I told him. You know, he wasn't going to listen to a whole lot anyway.
He's always been one of my heroes. I've always pulled for him when I was coming up, and when I got the chance to race against him, that was the biggest thrill of my life.
Richard Petty, a tribute to the King, has been brought to you by Chicagoland Processing, Enviromet, and First Brands Corporation, makers of STP engine treatment. The life of a race car driver is pretty tough. You spend a lot of time in hotels, and you got to have that family support, and it was always there for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. You know, I think Linda was 17, 18 years old when we got married, and I had just started racing, and then about a year and a half, Kyle came along, and then Sharon came along. You know, I mean, we just sort of started this thing out together, and she's been very supportive. She took care of the home life while I was out doing the racing stuff. But you know, I don't know that it was that tough. We grew into it, and that's the way we thought everything was supposed to be, and that's the way we did it. I always looked at the standpoint that we wasn't abnormal as all them other people that went to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and got off at 5, worked 5 days a week. Those were the abnormal people. We just did it and didn't think anything about it being any different, but being it was different than what everybody else lived and stuff, without someone like Linda to stand there and take the abuse of us not being there, not being at home when decisions had to be made, or the kids had to go to school, or had to go to the hospital for something, you know, she took care of all that, and it really made it easy on me, because then I could spend 100% of my time thinking about doing work on the race car and driving the race car. So it made the whole thing work so much easier. She did her part, and I did my part, and then we did a lot of it together, so it worked out pretty good.
You have to wonder, in 1959, did little Linda Owens have any idea what marrying Richard Petty would mean to her life?
We never looked down the road and said, well, 30 years from now, racing's going to be where it is right now. We never dreamed it would change from right where we were at. I guess what makes us different from some of the other people there today is that we were way back here. Richard was there when it started, in those very first years when he was a little boy that just climbed up on the windshield and wiped it off before he's dead because he was driving, and he knew then that he had a love with that automobile and the racetrack that was never going away.
Now, surely as a car owner, you'll have a little more time on your hands to spend at home. Do you have any special plans to kind of make up all those years?
Well, I tell you, I've been dreading this for years because all the time that I've been out doing all my thing and stuff, I said, Linda, I sure would like to hip you around the house, or I would like to mow the yard, or I'd like to plant these trees, or I'd like to do that, but I just ain't got time. But now I'll have time. I mean, talking about being wore out, I am going to be used up.
Ladies and gentlemen, where for the final time, the legend, the man, the king, Richard Petty, will say goodbye to all the millions of fans who have adored him for many, many years. So on your feet, wave and say goodbye, your special way to King Richard Petty.
Looking car. He was always a classy guy. He was a cut above everybody else and always has been.
Well, I watched him race when I was a kid, and I've always admired him. You know, he's won so many races and so many championships. And, you know, he's always been one of my heroes.
He was the guy that always ran the smart race and laid back, and in the end, he always moved up and won the race.
Thank you for everything you've ever done. You know, everything I learned from Richard Petty.